So we've got all this language that comes in around that, like hormetic stress, this micro trauma. How do things get stronger? How do we turn a crisis into an opportunity, a crisis-unity? How do we come through this? And so perhaps we could start just speaking at a personal level, because it gets if we don't ground it in our personal experience, then we might lose some listeners who don't have a background in community trauma. And so how do you feel about starting off about our personal experiences of what it feels like at an individual level when we encounter that fragmenting kind of challenge?
Yeah, I think it's super appropriate. I don't want to brush over like I don't want to steal the mic away, but straight away there's the variation, as you said, of trauma or crisis occurring. I mean, is present within the world. Straight away, what I think about, if we're looking at it in our own lives, if we want to be effective at meeting crises on any level, there's lots of people waving the banner for, maybe it's a crisis of conspiracy, for
Yes.
people with climate crisis, or the oceans, or whatever it is. If people don't have a quality capacity to meet the trauma and go through integration and then learning and repair in their own lives, when they do get to the point of meeting crises out there in the world and the community, they don't really. Sometimes it's hard to get into a harmonious flow, and it becomes it becomes a little bit of martyrdom, and we kind of kind of typical excessive activism, that kind of energy. It's like, that's the classic psychological thing of like, how about you make your own bed and get your own house in order before you go and try and save the rest of the world. So yeah, I think it's a very appropriate place to start.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. There's all sorts of ways in which our own trauma can get catalyzed by a stressful process. And so, just to keep examples of this, is when I'm coaching a woman or a couple that are going into a birth suite, then I'm just like, well, listen, the birth suite, that's where so many of your own traumas can really arise, where you as a woman can feel abandoned, or that, whatever your points are, it doesn't matter. It's different for every person. That can come up during the birthing suite. And so it's in the birthing experience. And so whilst we're doulaing anything, a business, an economy, our children into the world, and we're in a birthing suite, then there's this transition phase just before a big dilation happens and out the baby pops, where there's the trauma gets sort of activated. That you're in a good place. The midwife, the experienced midwife, when a whole bunch of that sort of comes up, I can't do it. No, you're not there. It's like, good. This is if we can breathe here now, and you told me this, remember you said, and when this happened, we were going to do this. If you've got if you have that awareness of when the trauma gets brought up and it can be held consciously, then the dilation and the baby can be born, But trauma, our own traumas get pressed upon and resound like harp strings by other traumas. And so it's important that we've had time to integrate our traumas, to connect them in, to have owned them, and to become a part of us, our wounds and our traumas and the things that we've been through, right? Whereas what happens, I think the image that I'd like to focus upon here is that trauma fragments, right? And so in the oldest traditional medicine system that we have in the world, shamanic medicine, one of the central things that underpins Chinese medicine and underpins Ayurvedic medicine and underpins Hippocratic and Tibetan medicine, shamanic medicine was the one that they all evolved from, is that a fragmented soul was the primary dis-ease. And so soul retrieval, whether it's the Inuit shaman or a Central Desert Australian shaman, whether they're from the Amazon or from the Egyptian sort of area, then they're all involved in this process of soul retrieval, right? And so a part of the soul has been lost, a part of the soul has been broken off, a part of the soul is stuck somewhere, right? And so here's the image that we've got, an ancient image. And the shaman is the one that helps that part of the soul to be recovered, right? And so trauma fragments. And let me give a personal example. When I was little, I was a happy, bubbly 3 or 4-year-old and very precocious, ahead of my years in some ways. And then I went to school as a year younger than everyone else. And everyone was a little bit older and a little bit better developed in some particular ways. And my happy, bubbly kind of but childlike thing suddenly just felt not applicable. And I went, ah! And that part of me got fragmented. I lost a little part of my soul. And it got tucked away through the trauma of those other sweet little kids, not just being themselves, schoolyard dynamics. I lost access to this little part of me, and it got fragmented. And then I left it in a corner of my heart, in a corner of my mind. I had shame around it. It was no longer my geeky, playful, little, bubbly little Jimmy version, right? Was lost to me. And I found all these other more sophisticated, funny, verbal parts that I put up to protect. But I'd really lost access to a very important thing. So we want to see that fragmentation, that trauma, the image is like a crystal shard shattering. Things break off. Trauma has a shattering effect, whereas healing has a rhizomatic web-like connecting effect, right? And so at the personal level, that trauma of, and fill in the blank, it could be a bad relationship with your mom, it could be all sorts of different things, childhood or later on. There's a split that happens in the psyche, and there's a little part that gets tucked away, and then tucked away with its ball of pain. So we wall it off. So it can't deal with that and can't deal with the pain, but can't deal with little Jimmy and his pain and shame. So the pain and the shame and the little Jimmy are under the stairs, right? Oh, fuck. But what needs to happen there is that I need to come in and find ways to contact and integrate that pain and that shame, the scars and the wounds, and sweet little Jimmy that was actually always fine. And so I've got to come in my own response to trauma and instead not be fragmenting. It's not an image like I need to surgically remove it with a scalpel. It's a rhizome. The rest of the parts of me, the gentle parts, the protective parts, the adult parts, the healing parts, the wise parts, all of these different parts coming around like cells around a wound. Like if I had an actual wound in my flesh, they surround the wound lovingly, all these other parts of me. And I say, you too are Jimmy. You're okay. You're a part of me. I got you, little man. You're like, but I'm too this and I'm not that. It's like, maybe not. But even if it's true, I'm too short and I'm too fat and I'm too white and I'm too bald. Yeah, but you're still all right and I got you. There's a connecting, a rhizomatic connection that takes place. And it must reconnect and knit that wound together if I am to integrate myself and the wound, the Auschwitz, the witch hunt, the divorce. That's a part of me. The Auschwitz is a part of me, my own Auschwitz. And it needs to be integrated. It can't be locked in the basement, unintegrated, with a part of the soul. That's a weird, festering, unhealthy process. So the personal response to trauma is one of recovering the fragmented parts of the soul and coming into relationship with the pain and the shame and the hurt and the wound, as well as that poor, sweet part of you that got disowned, that was afflicted with that pain and shame. So trauma shatters and fragments, and healing integrates and rhizomatically connects.